Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I need a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting of November 15th, 2021. Thank you. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. We would like to recognize the accomplishments of our fall student athletes, and I'm going to turn it over to Denise Wickham, Director of Athletics, please, to talk about. We have a lot to celebrate.
So, here, grab this.
You gotta have a mic.
I gotta have a mic.
No.
No, not that one, here. Here. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So, we're here to celebrate what happened in the fall for our fall athletic season. We had a wonderful season. I know I updated you guys the last time, but we have some of our athletes with us. 4 of our teams actually were Patroon Conference Championship teams this year, so that's a celebration for that. Our girls soccer team, we have Cheyenne and Emma Holler here, and Coach Kiefer. Come on up, girls. The girls played really wonderfully throughout the season. They were undefeated throughout the season, and then they lost in the second round of sectionals to end their season, but we're very proud of the effort that they made this year, and grateful for all the effort that they put in during the season. Our boys golf team, if we have any of our boys golfers here, you guys can come up. Our boys golf team were Patroon champions, and they were also Section 2 Class CD runner-ups. And this is Ryan Arp, who competed at sectionals, qualified and competed at sectionals. And Donovan Gallagher also competed at sectionals, or part of that sectional team. And Trey Smith competed at sectionals. Trey is also the long-standing medalist tournament winner at the Patroon Conference, I believe, fifth year in a row. So amazing efforts by these young boys, and we're very proud of everything that they did this year. Good job, guys. Our girls tennis team, I didn't see Coach Malcolm here. She is the coach of that team, and they were actually Patroon Conference champions, and they were the Section 2 Class B team champions. So this year they split tennis into individuals, doubles, and team championships. So I believe it's our 3rd year of girls tennis. That's speaking highly of Coach Malcolm's efforts as a coach, and the girls and the amount of time that they're putting into the program to develop it. So congratulations to them. And finally, our boys soccer team. They were Patroon champions, Section 2, Class B champions, and they ended their season as regional co-champions with Beekman Town. And we're very proud of their efforts. Coach Forrest did a wonderful job. I did ask him, he gave me permission to let you guys know that he will not be returning as a coach next year. And we're disappointed to hear that because he has done wonderful things with the program. He's really developed the character in the kids, the play, and they are competing at a very high level right now. So some of the boys, if you guys will come forward. Jack Mata. He's my first one I saw. Where'd your brother? Okay. Let's see, Liam Bowden. Again, just if we can give them a hand, because that was just amazing. So just a little bit more to share with you. So we do all conference teams, just, you know, for our varsity teams. And our boys golf, Trey Smith was the MVP this year. Ryan Arp and Donovan Gallagher all made the all-conference team. Girls tennis, Bryn Fitzmaurice and Stephanie Horlocker made the all-conference team. Girls volleyball, Chloe Ross and Shay Landversett made the all-conference team. Boys cross-country, Finn Kosich, Nicholas Barnes and Caleb Pettit, all-conference. Emily Smith, Anna Steyer and Jillian Aloisi for girls cross-country. Our boys soccer team, first team Isaiah Edmonds, Ben Reinhardt, Liam Bowden, Jack Mata second team, Joe Dommermuth second team, and Peyton Gergen second team. For our girls soccer, Ella Gruppe first team, Emma Holler, Ella Mulholland, Cheyenne Bogus, and Jessica Lamonda all first team. Second team, Emerson Gruppe, Carolyn Kosich, and Taryn Silk. So our kids, again, very competitive this season, and they're doing wonderful things out on the field. I'd like to say thank you to the board for, again, allowing these opportunities for kids. Athletics is extremely important to these kids, and they're competing at very high levels. Thank you so much.
Before you sit down, can you ask all these kids just to come up here so we can take a picture?
Boys and girls, can you come up in front to get a picture?
Come on, everybody in the middle. And Tammy, please get up in the middle.
Come right up here, guys.
And I didn't tell anybody.
Tall people in the back, you know the drill.
I didn't tell anybody I was going to do
Tall
this.
people in the back, short people in the front.
I consider myself short.
Got some stragglers. How much front are we doing? We're like in the very front. We're
Oh, Peyton. Hold on.
stand in front.
Master.
It's me.
Backwards, is that the crown? We're backwards.
You guys, Tammy, get up here in the middle.
Okay, I'm right here. This is good.
Right here next to the down. I
Please.
have a team here. Hey, hey.
I'm right here. I'm not going to be in
Now-
the middle. Please.
I got to say something here.
Okay, hold on. Now, everybody should be able to see the camera, right? Amazing kids.
You know, for the last year, when Jeter and Mariano Rivera and Big Oppie wandered through the rest of the country, almost everywhere they went, the local fans and that paid tribute to them because they were great athletes. You guys were great, but the fact is, this is really a going away for Tammy. She's going to be leaving us in February. And for your whole career, she's made this school district what it is. And I hope some of you here have some nice words for Tammy. What she's done, look at those fields out there. That's her. That was her. The ability for you to perform at the level you did is due in no small part for the hundreds of hours that Tammy put in. So please, when you think back about what great year you had, think about who made it possible. Your parents did, your coaches did, but Tammy had a big part of that. And please, somebody here, one of you, all of you, wish her well in her retirement. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know everything you.
Great year, Gary.
You're spending. I'm gonna go send you Scott. Check my brother.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, that was wonderful. And it was just fabulous, and we were able to provide them with the accolades. So I'm just, thank you, Duncan, for recognizing that and suggesting it. Thank you, Tammy, for all of your work and dedication. And thank you to all the students and coaches and parents. So that's a tough act to follow. And now I'm going to move on to the open forum. So the 30-minute open forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public. Comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting prior to 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting, and state in the email if you would like your correspondence read out loud. To Daphne Pearson, District Clerk at pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. This is an opportunity for residents to voice general concerns or compliments, especially about items on the agenda. However, this is not the time to register complaints about specific individuals, about items that should be addressed confidentially through the proper channels, typically with the principal or the superintendent of schools. All comments shall be addressed to the district clerk and shall be limited to no more than 5 minutes per board policy 2180. Please note that members of the board do not directly respond to citizens' concern during the public open forum. Are there any individuals that would like to speak? Did we receive any emails? We did not. Okay, with that, then I would like to move on to the presentation and discussion. 6.1, the funding analysis for future capital work. Tammy Sutherland and Chris DiCarlo, the senior financial analyst of Bernard Donegan, will be discussing with that. I would like to turn it over. Thank you.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Chris in a second. So Duncan mentioned previous capital work. Now it's time to talk a little bit about future capital work, because just like your home, there's always some work to be done that needs to be done. So we have our facilities committee that has begun meeting this year, and they have a meeting in the next couple of weeks again. The architects have put together their 5-year building condition survey, and this is a review of all of the systems of the school district. And so they start to prioritize things that needed work, and then beyond that, things that we would like to see here at Greenville. So of course, the important part of that is how could any such work be funded? And that's where I invited Chris to the meeting tonight to just start the conversation of what the next capital project could look like. We have been saving in our capital reserve. We have maxed it out now at $2 million. So part of the conversation is what kind of capital project could that fund, because you have building aid, and what would that mean? So I'm sure there's going to be questions. There's going to be time to talk about this over the next few months. We wanted to start this conversation so the board is aware of what the funding would look for capital work. So at this point, I will turn it over to Chris. And everyone has a packet at their seats.
Thank you, Tammy. Good evening. My name is Chris DiCarlo. I'm a financial analyst with Bernard Donning Incorporated. We are the district's municipal advisor, so we advise districts on capital projects and the issuance of debt in relation to those capital projects. So what we have for you this evening is our two reports. One is a financial report looking at what size project the district can achieve over the next in the next vote in May of 22, and also how much a supplemental vote may be into the future, May of 2032. The second document that we provided to you is a timetable of dates, and that timetable of dates walks through the steps leading up to a voter referendum, to the voter referendum, and then some steps beyond the voter referendum. That's just some housekeeping things that need to happen to proceed with the project. So what we'll do is we'll start with the larger packet with the school building on the front of it, and if you'd like, you can open up to page 3, and we'll start going through some of the assumptions. I apologize for the small font on the screen. There's a lot of assumptions that we build into these reports. So the first assumption that we have to look at anytime we look at a capital project is, what is our state building aid ratio? And here at Greenville, our building aid ratio is currently 70%. So for every dollar that we spend on aid eligible work, the state will reimburse us 70 cents on that dollar. So that's a big factor anytime we run these projections for any of our districts. The second factor that we need to look at is what's the bond percentage, or what is the aidable factor of the project. And so in all of these scenarios that I'm presenting this evening, we're assuming that 95% of the project is going to be eligible for building aid. The goal is always 100%, but any time you submit a project or have a project go through SED, there's always going to be something that might get kicked out. So we back off 5% to be conservative. We've run two different options for you, and they're essentially two different paths that the district can go down. The district has been doing cash projects on an annual basis. So those are interfund transfers that are within your budget vote annually. And that's, one of the options that you have is to continue doing those cash projects, or the other option is that we could suspend doing those cash projects, and what that could potentially do is give us a potential drop off in your debt service or your local share for your buildings. So we've laid out option A, which is continuing those cash projects, and we'll go through the mechanics of that scenario. And then option B is, what if we stop doing the cash projects? What does that look like, and how does that impact the size of the project that we could do in this May of 2022 referendum? So we'll focus on option A. There's two different numbers in each of the options. So 1 signifies the first vote, the May of 2022 vote, and 2 signifies the May of 2032 vote, so the second vote in each one of these sequences of potential voter referendums. So just going down with option A1, the vote date in May of 2022, we're assuming SED approval in July of 2023, and then we have a series of dates that are listed there in terms of the borrowings, when they may take place, when you may have your first debt service due, and when you'll be submitting state aid forms to get building aid flowing. Just as a reminder, you have to have both a certificate of substantial completion form and a final cost report filed with SED for building aid to commence. And so you'll see in the maturity schedules that we go over how that building aid flows for each one of these projects. Option 2, or the vote 2, would be a May 2032 referendum, and a series of dates that follow along with that after that vote. It's a set of dominoes, essentially, that need to happen in order to get to the point where we have an approved project with the states, and then when we'd be issuing debt service for the project. So we've used some conservative interest rates in the analysis, bond anticipation notes. So bond anticipation notes are temporary financings that are typically borrowed during construction. It's almost like a bridge loan to get you to the point where we're ready to issue serial bonds, which is the permanent financing. So for bands, bond anticipation notes, we're using a 4%, and for serial bonds, we're using a 5%. Those are very, very conservative high interest rates in today's market. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's conservative enough, given that inflation, is potentially rearing its head. Social Security was just increased by 5.x%. So I don't know. It looks low to me, but
Right.
I'm not an expert.
So in today's market, as we're seeing right now, bond anticipation notes go out for under 1%. So we've had districts issue notes for 0.25, 0.3%. It's historically low. It's the lowest that I've seen in my career. Serial bonds, if you were to issue today, you'd probably be 1.5% to 2%. So we do have a bit of a cushion in there. And if interest rates rise, especially prior to the May of 2032 vote, in this second set of options that we've run here, we could always reevaluate the rates that we're using here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the type of funding this is, it's not like commercial funding where the loaner is paying taxes. They get a tax break on this, so our rates would typically be lower for these.
Right, you will be issuing what's called a tax-exempt financing.
So it's a big difference.
Right, so your bonds would be issued on Wall Street as a public market serial bond. Tax exempt.
So that's one reason why that rate, you're saying that's very conservative, and it is in that market.
Right, the rates are conservative in today's markets. We don't see, especially for the May of 22 vote, rates rising that quickly. Rates are definitely going to start going up eventually, but we don't see them going up that quickly. And really the main thing to focus on is there's what's called a state aid reimbursement rate. We're using a 4% for that reimbursement rate, so that's 100 basis points spread between the serial bond issuance and the state assumed rate. So that state assumed rate is what the state is amortizing our building aid back to us on. Right now that rate from the state is 1.5%. So if we were to get a project approved in this current fiscal year, we'd be getting 1.5%. So what that means is that for the analysis to work and for the numbers to work, we have to bond within that 1.5% to 2.5% range. So we're being conservative by building 100 basis points spread in between the bonding rate and the revenue rate that's coming back on the state aid. Option B follows the same dates, so it's really focusing on option A being the continuing of the cash project, and option B stopping the cash project. And we'll go through the mechanics of each one of those sets of numbers as we get to those pages within the report. Any other questions on that first page of assumptions?
I'm really confused with May 2032 under A2 and
So,
under B2.
May 20, you'll see that in the report once you get to it, but what that is, it's a drop off in your local share. And so we backed into when a voter referendum could possibly happen to fill in that second drop off. So this is more of a long range planning for your capital. And that's what that May of 2032 vote would represent.
Right, so what I had asked Chris to do is already looking at the building condition survey and the substantial amount of work and money that's tied to it, we had looked at in the future, when is the next debt paid off, so that the facilities committee could look at priority 1 and priority 2, looking at 2 different projects in the future to really have that long range plan.
Okay.
So that's why he's going to look at those 2.
Thank you. Pages 4 and 5, Page 4 goes through the revenue and expense breakdowns for the option A. So the option A scenario being the continuing of the cash project. So for the May of 2022 voter referendum, with the $2 million capital reserve, the district could achieve a $5,180,000 capital project with no local share. So that down payment that you've set aside is offsetting any local share that's associated with that $5.1 million project. So you see on the left-hand side of the page the revenue breakdown, $2 million from the capital reserve with the balance of it coming from the issuance of serial bonds. On the right-hand side of that equation, we've set aside dollars for what would be your construction and incidental costs, and then we've set aside $1 for what we call financing contingency. In this case, it's the use of the capitalized interest. capitalized interest are project proceeds that are used in a time in which building aid is not yet flowing. So building aid at the earliest can flow 18 months after you receive SC approval. So if there's a window of time where we have a borrowing and we have interest due to the bank, the project can pay for that interest out of the project proceeds. The goal with that is always to minimize that or to not use it if we don't need to, but we want to show it there because that's how this analysis mechanically works, is showing the use of those offsets to fit within either one of the drop-offs that you have coming up in your local share. Project A2 would be the second vote of this scenario, and with the drop-off that's associated with it, the district could do, without any capital reserve dollars, $8.3 million, so a little over $8,375,000 capital project. And what that would do is that would fit into a drop-off that's in your local share upcoming in that year, and that project would be a no marginal tax rate increase to what you're currently paying. And so on the right-hand side of that page are both the expense breakdown for the construction incidentals, as well as the dollars set aside for the capitalized interest.
Quick question.
Yep.
So for the A2, are you saying that to avoid drop-off, so you have one loan being fully satisfied instead of having to drop off, you're just talking about how much you would need to bond in order to kind of keep that annual amount owed, if you will,
Right.
constant, right?
Yeah, so what it's doing is looking at there's two sides of the equation, your building debt service and your building aid. And the difference between your debt service and your building aid is what's called local share. And so there's a drop off in your local share. And that's what that project would be fitting in and fitting you in seamlessly. And you'll see that on the charts as we go through them. I'm kind of giving away the answers to the test right now and I'm going to show my backup in the pages behind it. So.
Okay, and one other question is, how did you get to the like almost 8.4 million for A2?
So 8.4 million
the amount of the drop off?
That's the amount of. So when you take the $8.4 million, we factor in what the debt service is on that amount, what the projected building aid is on that amount, and we come up with what's the net local share. And that's what can fit into the drop-off, is the local share for this size of a project. So it's what the drop-off is absorbing effectively any local share for this project, and it's keeping it nice and flat at a certain level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next page is the option B scenarios, which this is the option for the district if you were to choose to stop doing your annual cash projects. And so by stopping the annual cash projects, what that would do for you is it would give you a drop in your local share. And so combining the capital reserve and then leveraging what amount of project we could get from the building aid, that first vote in May of 22 could be $9,440,000. And that project would be no marginal increase to what you're currently paying. So we have the revenue and expense breakdown, and then the second vote, the May 2032 vote, or the next drop off would be about a $6.1 million project. Any questions on the revenues or expenses?
Can you explain the difference again between B and A?
Yeah, so I think the next page what we included was on page 6 is a kind of a graphical look of how your projects may be laid out. So the top half of the page where you can see the $540,000 cash project, in the option A, you would continue to do your annual cash projects, and I have another slide in this too that shows you how much of those, what the dollar amount value is of each one of those cash projects going forward would be. But in that scenario, you're continuing to do your cash projects, so it's not giving you a drop off in your local share, because those cash projects are filling in those drop offs for you. So in that scenario, option A won the first vote, would be $5.1 million, and then the second vote further out in May of 2032 would be the $8.3 million.
I got that one. So then B. What is B again?
B is if you
Stop cash project.
B is if you so B is if you stop doing the cash projects. Right now, the district in your annual budget, you include an interfund transfer to capital, which constitutes a cash project from the state. So what that does is, in your newsletter to the community, you let them know what you are planning to do with those funds, and then the state will pay us building aid back on that cash project, fully funded from cash. They'll pay back that project with building aid over 15 years. Those cash projects count against the overall local share and in your exclusion for your tax gap. So option B is eliminating those cash projects, but what that does for you is it gives you a drop off in your local share. So it gives you the opportunity now that if you need to do more work now in a larger capital project, which you may think is maybe that's more efficient for the district to do that large amount of work now as opposed to doing smaller cash projects, that may be more of a challenge for you to handle. So the option B would stop those cash projects and give us a drop off in the local share, and then we can leverage that and build in a larger project and still be at that no marginal increase over what you're currently paying in terms of your local share.
And the only downside would be that if there's something unexpected in doing B, then you really can't address the needs of that because you kind of already spent the money.
So that's exactly right. The option B would keep your local share flat. If something did come up that was an emergency situation, that could be a different story. You could get an emergency project filed with the state and get some work done to resolve those issues. So it handcuffs you from doing, picking and choosing what cash projects you might want to do. I think that this will make a lot of sense once you start going through the mechanics and once you kind of see the numbers play out. I tried to put in an order that I thought would work. So if anybody has some more questions to go through it, please continue to ask them. Page 7 is a graphical look of how a traditional capital project works in New York State. So this document reads from left to right. And so you can see we have the voter referendum flag in May of 2022. We're assuming it'll take your architect maybe 6 or 7 months to design the project, and then maybe 6 or 7 months once you submit it to SED to have that project approved by the state. At which point in time we have a live active project that's approved by SED, and we can go forward and bid and award contracts and start borrowings as they're necessary to meet your cash flow needs.
One quick thing for the assumption for SED, as there have been funding available from federal funds,
Right.
Is 7 months, is there any type of backlog? Like we saw a year and a half ago that there was a tremendous backlog, and so has that been cleared through?
We're seeing them expedite the review of federal stimulus projects because there is a time frame to obligate those funds and to use those funds. So there is an effort on SED's part to move those projects to the front of the line. With traditional projects, it's still at the mercy of the project managers. Unfortunately, there's only really 1.5 project managers there. There's one full-time and a half-time or a part-time person there right now. I believe they've since hired another project manager, and there's another person that may have recently accepted. So the hope is that they'll eventually get up to 3 or 4, which is the traditional amount of project managers at the state. But there is a little bit of a lag to get that approval right now. The next slide is how the May of 2032 vote could lay out. So same concept, reading from left to right. You have your vote in May of 2032. Maybe it takes 6 to 7 months for approval, 6 to 7 months, 6 to 7 months for design, maybe 6 to 7 months for approval. And the real thing to focus on this page here is that 34, 35 year. That's when the drop off is in your local share in these scenarios. So that's when, that's why we backed up to that May of 2032 vote date. And so you'll see that local share drop off once we go through some of the maturity schedules and the summary of your existing debt pages.
And at the bottom on the last slide and this one, what is debt service problems?
So building aid commences at the earliest 18 months after approval. So you can start getting building aid 18 months after you get SED approval. We always are conservative, and more times than not, everybody says a project's going to be done in December 15th. We're still not done. So we always conservatively back in a 6-month cushion. So we're assuming that the aid would start in 24 months. So that's just, that debt service problems is just, if we were to project building aid at an 18-month time frame, could there be an issue where maybe the building aid's not flowing to line up with the debt service properly, and maybe you have an issue where there's a spike in your local share and we have to help you manage that.
Okay.
Page 9 is a look at your existing debt service and the projected building aid that's flowing along with your existing debt service. So similar to the other pages, this page reads from left to right. You have all of your principal and interest for all of your bonds that have been issued in columns A and B. Those are all known. All of your debt is issued at this point for your building project. So those are all fixed amounts in that column. That comes up to column C, which is your total debt service, and then column D, which is the building aid that's flowing on all of your existing projects. So effectively in column F, what is our local share? So what is the amount that's left over after our building aid comes in for our debt service payments? So it's about $70,000, but the district has been doing cash projects annually. We're projecting out into the future in this scenario that you'll continue to do those cash projects. So each of those cash project amounts are listed in column G, and the associated building aid that would flow with those is in column H. So what we're really focusing on this page is in column J, is what is your overall local share for all of your buildings, inclusive of your cash projects. And so you're about that $230,000 level, and it's flat out for several years.
No, actually, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Tammy, but I think it would be helpful. Your explanation of what the cash projects are, a couple of slides ago, was very helpful. But could you provide an actual example, or several examples of what we do this year, last year, for actual cash projects?
So the last year's capital project was the 2 renovations at the elementary school, those classrooms. So that was our annual project last year.
The cash, that would follow.
That was our cash project. That was in our budget that we were going to do the renovations for those 2 rooms. Previous to that, I'm trying to think. Drawing a blank on what we've done the annual projects with.
Okay.
Because some of it we do with year-end funds.
The demo of the modular?
No, that was part of the smart schools. But those are the type of projects. You plan renovations, so if we kept that in, we would, so the thing is do we want to keep limping along with 2 more classrooms? Do we want to take that funding and say, let's get 15 classrooms done up front? So we have in the and slowly build that back up, so that 5, 6, 7 years, when you have those smaller projects, again, you've built up a sum to do it.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
Can I follow up on Jay's question?
And for capital reserve, just a reminder, is the voters establish it and the voters approve spending out of it.
And not to be argumentative, but the point that Tracy was making about if we commit what we would normally use in a given budget year for a particular project, if we commit that to the grander project, doesn't mean that we couldn't be able to address some issue by not making a contribution to the capital reserve that year. In other words, we could, if we had something come up, we could spend the money without putting it into reserve. Once it's in the reserve, we can't do it for anything but the capital, but we can use that money, if need be, beforehand. So that's why we do a fund transfer at the end of the year, not making monthly payments into that.
Okay. Page 10 of the report takes this chart of information and puts it into a graphical format. And so you can see the solid black line in the middle of the page is your current local share. So you can see from 2023 out to 2034, your current local share with the cash project included is flat. There's no really opportunities to build in a project because of a drop-off. In this scenario, there's option A of continuing the cash project. So for your May of 2022 vote, in this option, if you want to flip to the next page, this is the maturity schedule that's associated with the $5,180,000 project. And so if you see in column J, it's a zero local share project. It's actually producing a little bit of a positive cash flow for you. So I'm going to flip to the other side of the page. Starting in column B, you have your down payment of capital, or your $2 million down payment from the capital reserve. And then column C is the principal payment structure that's paying back the life of the remaining bond, or the amount that we were refinancing. And then column E is what's your associated interest on the notes and bonds. Column F is your total debt service. Column G is the projected building aid. And then effectively getting over to column J, which is that net local share. So this is what I was saying, this is with $2 million of capital reserve, that's how much project you can leverage with that reserve and have a no local share project. Because if you remember from the previous page with the flat out graph, there was no opportunity to build in any local share in this option because you're continuing the cash projects. So page 12 of the report takes the blue existing debt service with continuing the cash projects, and then in columns K through P incorporates that $5,180,000 project. So focusing on column Q, you're not going to see much of a change from column J to column Q because that was a no local share project with the $5 million project. And then page 13 of the report just shows graphically, this is inclusive of the $5,180,000 project, so it looks very similar to the previous chart because that project would have had no local share associated with it. But you can see out in the 2034-35 year, there's a drop off there. And there's a drop off in your local share, and what that is another opportunity to fill in another project if the district and the board choose to do so. So what we wanted to do is quantify what size project could fit into that drop-off that's in the 2034-35 year. So flipping to page 14, this is another maturity schedule. This is for the A2 scenario. This was the May of 2032 votes. So to fit in that drop-off would be an $8,375,000 capital project. And so you can see on column J, this project does have a local share. But when we combine it with your existing local share, which we'll do on the next page, if you want to flip to page 15, the purple columns I through N, incorporate the $8,375,000 project, and where we had that drop off in the 34-35 year, this project is absorbing that drop off and keeping you still flat out at that $230,000 local share. So this will be a no marginal tax increase project to the taxpayers. And then graphically on page 16, showing what that overall local share is, combining your existing local share the May 2022 voter referendum, and the May 2032 voter referendum. So you can see pretty much flat out, no local share increases through 2050. Page 17 starts the option, what we're calling option B, which is stopping the cash projects. So we're assuming you would stop those cash projects after the 24 year. So this page reads very similarly. The only difference between the earlier page of your existing debt service is that column G, we've stopped the cash projects. So if you go over to column J, you can see we're dropping from about $230,000 down to about $40,000. So it's a $193,000 drop off. And what that does is if we leverage that with the $2 million of capital reserves and the drop off there, it gives us an opportunity that if we need to do more work now, that we can get that work done in this first voter referendum in May 2022. So on page 18, it shows graphically how that looks for you. So the chart looks much different than the previous blue bars that we showed in option A. It's shown, if you're going from 2024 to the drop off in 2025. Page 19 is utilizing the $2 million and the drop off in the local share. The district could do a $9.4 million capital project. In that column J, we are showing a local share there though, but that's what the drop off is in that fiscal year starting in 25. So that's able to fit in nice and flat and seamless for you. So pages 20 and 21 show the numbers and then graphically how that fits in for you on page 21. And if you look on page 21, we have that drop off in 2035 still. So it's still an opportunity to build in some additional work out in the 2035 year. So page 22 of the report is what size project with no capital reserve could fit into that drop off, and that's a little over $6.1 million. And then the same concept with pages 23, blending in with your existing. And the first vote in this option, and then the option, the second vote, the $6.1 million project, keeping you flat at $230,000. And so the pink bar charts on page 24, again, showing you flat out no increases to the local share, but giving you an opportunity to fit in those two different projects. We just did include a couple of appendix pages too. Appendix page A is just a history of your state building aid ratios. We're currently in what's called the Build 4 formula. So currently the 2021 ratio is 70%. It's actually projected to go up to 72.1% in 21-22, but that rate has not yet been confirmed. It will be confirmed in the next month or two. Once the state aid reports become available, we'll know what that rate for 21-22 is. But that's another factor we've used to be conservative. We're using the lower of the two. So until that 72.1% is confirmed by the state, we ran these numbers assuming a 70% building aid ratio. And then appendix page B is a look at your maximum cost allowances. So for every student occupied building in the state assigns what are called building aid units, and that sets what the maximum amount of construction and incidental dollars the district will aid us up to. We can spend above and beyond those dollar amounts, those thresholds, but the state will not aid us above those thresholds. So for example, under column A, the elementary school, you have about $11.6 million, that yellow highlighted row of construction aid ceiling, and about $2.3 million of incidental aid ceiling to work with. The state does what they call a 5-year look back on any projects that have received approval from SED, and they deduct those costs on whichever basis they are, whether it's your plans and submittal or your plans and specs that are submitted or the final cost report value that the state has. So we have to back off those costs that are on file with the state from those aid ceiling calculations. So currently, there are some pretty big dollars that are hitting you on the incidental side that fall off in July of 2023. So that's why in the first vote date set, we've targeted SED approval dates of July of 2023, because that's when those projects reset and fall out of the look back. So that's a key date that we'll have to keep in mind as we go forward with any planning for the project. And then column B are the associated aid ceilings for construction and incidentals at the high school as well. And just with the incidental aid ceilings, I just want to point out that the incidentals, it probably seems like a high number, but that includes site work. So anything that's 5 feet or beyond outside of your buildings, any field work, parking lots, all of that falls under that category. So you can really kind of eat up that number pretty quickly. Any questions? That's a lot of information that I went through rather quickly on that report.
One question / clarification, just going back to the cash versus no cash, and what you can do in terms of capital projects in the year. Setting some mechanism of how you might be able to still do projects with no cash, in terms of actual dollars, can you make, like, just focusing on that bottom line, how much would we have potentially for capital projects, every year with the continuing cash projects option versus the not continuing it?
So we on page 6, we quantified that in the upper half of the page there. So give me a second to get there. So by continuing the cash projects, the sum of all those cash projects would be a little over $2.1 million over the amount of years that we've set aside there. So if you go to the far right side of the page, the totals, you can see they're pretty close. The 16.2 million for option A, 16 million or 16 million one effectively for option B. So what that's saying is that whichever direction you go, you're going to be able to accomplish approximately the same amount of work in each of the options. It's just which scenario, do you think is the best for you to go forward now? Do you have some immediate needs now, or do you want the flexibility to do the cash projects and you do a smaller project now? So it's a good position to be in that you have all of these options. That's what this report is effectively just showing you what your options that you have at this time are.
Okay, then maybe I misunderstood the discussion earlier, because I thought that when you presented it, I thought that was my understanding that, let's say if it's 2.1 million or 2.2 million over 10 years, divide by 10-ish, that's about the amount you have each year for cash projects. And under option B, it looked like you don't have that money, so you're not doing the cash projects.
Right.
At some point when we were talking, I thought, I don't know if it was Duncan or Tracy or Tammy, someone I thought said that you can still do cash projects, you just have to move some money around. And I think that's the part that confused me. So is it, if we go option B, are there no cash projects unless we have to seek whatever the extraordinary approval or whatever the term was from the state? Or is it just like an accounting mechanism we plan for to still do cash projects under option B?
I would say if it's a true capital project, it has to be in the correct line item. And it has to be voter approved, whether it's in your budget or the referendum. What we do have flexibility is if there's some funds remaining at the end of the year, and this is what we've done, we have done small things. That's where you've seen some of the paving. But if it's anything that needs to have SED approval, then that has to be voter approved in that correct line item. So does that make sense? So while there's flexibility to, there's always flexibility if something breaks down maintenance within Rich's codes. But to actually do a project that SED is going to approve, that has to be in a line item that's approved by the voters, not just something that we can decide at the end of the school year.
Okay, understood. And so the no stop cash project option is really almost like a bookend, right? If you say that you're going as far as you can in one direction to see how far that gets you. versus option A, which is, I think, it'd be fair to call that more the status quo pathway.
Right.
But you could do, if we wanted, we could also look at something in the middle, right? Where we're not completely stopping cash projects, but we're eating into some of that. I mean, in other words, can we look at something between the A and B, or is it really just an either or?
I mean, we could come up with a hybrid. It would be challenging to manage. I think more challenging to manage than if you were to just stop them.
Okay.
That would probably be my advice to the district is one way or the other.
Impact of the tax levy.
Right.
So,
One final question I have, and again, this is just to make sure, because I've been through 2 of these now, okay? And we go back to the conservative estimates you projected. I believe that in both the cases I went through before, the conservative estimates that were projected to us came in significantly lower. The actual funding we got was at rates that were significantly lower than the projected.
Right. Yeah, I did look back at the last authorization, and you bonded at about a 2.3%.
Right.
It's phenomenal. It's a fantastic interest rate. They're lower today. But these are conservative rates.
Yep.
If it comes in better, when we get to the point of bonding the project, we have the option at that point to maybe front-end load some of our debt service payments. So if the interest comes in lower, maybe we pay off some of the principal sooner. We can always front-end load bonds, and what that could potentially do for you is give you, instead of that drop-off being in 34 or 35, maybe it's in 32, 33, or 31, 32. So, our numbers are conservative,
Yep.
but I think it's always in the district's best interest to go forward with these conservative numbers, and then, we over-deliver and then
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah, and then we have an opportunity to maybe change the timing of the next votes or give us more of a drop off for the next vote. So
So one of the questions I had pertained to timing. So let's say with option A1 or B1, we know that in, I think you had said 2035, that our current bond will be completed so that we'll be able to then anticipate a larger project. So my question is, by starting it now and it continues, we're looking for the 5 years past when the next one, where the next bond kind of ends, is it also reducing the amount of that future project? Does that question make sense?
So typically we see districts, if you can get on a cycle where you're voting if you can get to a cycle where you're voting every 5 years, that's a good time frame to be on, because that aid ceiling calculation that I showed you, those aid ceilings reset every 5 years. So a lot of districts that we work with try to get on a cycle where they're voting every 5 years. And that's, you're not getting too much fatigue from too much construction happening. So that seems to be a general, statewide, that we're seeing most districts voting on kind of that schedule and trying to hit those 5-year checkpoints for votes. Could it reduce the size of a future project? I mean, that depends on how things turn out in terms of the debt service, the interest you get on these projects, and the building aid that you get back on these projects. So I don't know if I answered your question, but did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
I think I only have one question. Tammy, I'm assuming we're gonna choose what scenario we're gonna go with after we look at the breadth of the number of projects. Because that would clear it up for me. Because I need to see what kind of in depth we're going at in order to be sure that we're somewhat not gonna need cash projects for a while. in May of '22, what happens to the financing of the project if the May of '32 goes down?
If the May of 32 goes down,
It's not approved.
so that's potentially in that year you could have a drop off in your local share. If you don't have any debt service to fill in that 34 or 35 year. So it could have implications on your tax cap.
But the two are independent of each other.
Correct.
I see that.
Yes.
So then in looking at the timeline, so we have November 15th and the long-range capital planning report. And then, Tim, are you thinking then January for that board meeting to kind of come in and lay things 2022.
Eric, second. Jay, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any motion to approve the real property tax adjustment for 2021, 2022?
Troy, Eric, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the agreement between the Greenville Central School District and the County of Green for services pertaining to COVID testing.
Eric, and a second. Jay, thank you.
Any discussion?
I just have a question. So I was looking, this testing coordinator is getting, what is this, 23,900? Who is getting that money? Where is that coming from?
That's coming from the county federal stimulus funds that they,
It doesn't like me.
both of them don't like it. So the the counties were, to help school districts, were able to file for federal stimulus funds for the specific purpose of helping school districts with the required testing. So Greene County has filed on behalf of all of their county schools, and that's the allotment that will come to Greenville to help us with the required training.
So we're training someone,
So they also have agreements with Questar 3. So Questar 3 has hired the nurses. So they will be on site 1 day a week for the required training. But that specifically would come to us. So we're looking at someone helping that will be with that nurse during the day that will help capture the required names and who has to be done. So track all that and keep that going. So they will work in conjunction with the nurse from Questar. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So just to clarify, it is not a cost to us.
There's no cost to us.
Thank you.
And then through that grant also is the point of care machines that we, once this is sent to them, they have already received those, that they will come and they'll be in each of our school nurses buildings, school nurses offices. And that's for someone who's symptomatic during the day. With permission, a student could be tested, and then the parent doesn't have to worry about going someplace to find a test, and we would know right away if we have an issue.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need a motion to appoint membership for committees.
And a second. Angela, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to appoint membership to the Greenville Educational Foundation.
Jay, Eric, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the surplus items.
Jay and Angela, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to turn the meeting over to Duncan McPherson if he could provide us with an update of the NISBA annual meeting. He was our representative.
Well, I have a 22-page report here, but I'm not going to read it all.
Thank you.
On October 18th, approximately 300 delegates heard 23 resolutions, 17 recommended by the Resolutions Committee and 6 not recommended. Of these, 17 were adopted. Delegates also considered and ultimately opposed one bylaw amendment. I'm going to spend a minute on the bylaw. The bylaw was a recommendation that, or a resolution to amend the bylaws to basically require a in-person hearing. It came about after the originally scheduled in-person hearing for this year was canceled due to COVID and to issues with the what COVID was putting on the convention hotel in New York City. So one chapter put in a bylaws amendment resolution which would have changed that. It failed. And I'm gonna say the discussion was rather, probably the most spirited. But the reality is well under, it requires 2/3 to amend, well under 50% voted for it. So I think it was 43 or 44%. Couple of resolutions I'd like to talk to. Okay, let me give you a little background just to make sure. Number one, does everybody get the New York State, everybody in the board get the New York State school board publications via email? Okay, if you haven't, make sure you register and get them, because all of these things are explained in detail in there, including a report that came out like 2 or 3 days after the meeting in which they summarized all this. So I don't want to go into it, but for the public. The ones that stood out to me were resolutions that would require the school board association to lobby. That's what basically they do. They lobby with the legislature and the governor's office to try to put forth issues that are of importance to the group, to school boards around the state. Anything that's in that pool of issues has a 5-year sunsetting clause. So a number of these issues were put right back in after 5 years off. And they go to things like equitable salaries, equitable funding. For example, for years now, there's been a settlement. There was a settlement. Kathy Hochul, the new governor, just made a commitment to try to settle that lawsuit, saying that she will start providing funds, $1.4 billion of additional funds into the foundation aid this coming year. Okay, 700,000+ coming upstate, the rest going to New York City. 530 million goes to New York City. I said thousand, it's million. 1.4 billion, 730 million. Okay, so we're going to see hopefully a significant rise in our state contributions. All right, so those are the kind of things that are in these resolutions. This one has to do with open meeting law. It was adopted. Okay. This other one has to do with the ability to go further and to have open meetings for committees rather than having to have public. Okay. I should just read my notes, but I didn't. The idea that, well, Dave hit it. Dave asked a couple of meetings ago if he could participate in our meeting remotely because he wasn't going to be here. And the requirement is, yes, he can, but he has to publish the address he's going to be from. And if anybody wanted to show up at that site, they could come and watch that meeting sitting over Dave's show. One of the resolutions that was adopted is that we would eliminate that. And I think our experience over the last year and a half, okay, goes a little bit to help that. So that's one that was adopted. That was a new one, okay? The only other one I wanted to do was there were the two. The open business meetings were the ones that there were some local. Voorheesville had two proposals in, both of which passed, but they're those kind of things. Shenendahoa had one in that failed. So I think, unless you want me to go more depth, I got a whole bunch of things here. If you want me to go into any real depth.
What I wanted to do, thank you, Duncan, I appreciate that. What I wanted to do was make sure that everyone understands that this is a vehicle and a mechanism, because this happens annually, whereby the public, through their school boards, can request certain focuses and efforts. And so I think that it's something that can be leveraged. It has in the past and so forth, and I'm not sure that everyone was aware of it, so I just asked. It seemed like a wonderful opportunity for Duncan to kind of explain it and for people to understand that this is an opportunity. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next on the agenda, we have the superintendent search update, and here, just briefly, what I have is that we have received a total of 26 applications that the consultant is going through, And let's see, today we selected the individuals for these stakeholder committees. So Daphne will be contacting the individuals. In several of the committees, we had more individuals than we had spots for, so we just selected them, not quite out of a hat. It was actually a rubber plastic container. And people were here observing it. So let's see. The training for the individuals that will be participating on the stakeholder committee is December 8th. So we will have more information to follow shortly on that. Then we'll be inviting 6 candidates the week of November 29th, and with the 3 finalists coming the week of the 13th. Any questions? That's kind of a
Are we
summary.
going to be provided with those names?
Yes, we can share those names. Yes, and
Yeah.
I can copy the board.
absolutely. In fact, one of the things, the students, we did get I'd say a solid response from the students, so that was very nice for that. Any other questions? Okay. And the other update I'd like to provide is for the Board of Education Gold Workshop. And everyone should have it on their calendars for January 22nd. And part of the process is that we're going to be doing, or NYSBA is going to be doing a SWOT analysis. In order to get all of the information for that, they're going to ask us to fill out a survey for that. So we will be sending a survey or the link to everyone, I'm going to say December 1st, and we'll have a month to complete it for that. And then what that will allow is NYSBA to then, in early January, consolidate all the information, kind of the good, the bad, what we're doing, where we can improve, and so forth, and have it available for the 22nd. So as we go through and thinking about what are some of the priorities that we ourselves are thinking that we can accomplish. Any questions on that? Okay. Does anyone have any items for a discussion at a future meeting? Okay. Then I would like to move along to the open forum. And for the closing open forum, we made a slight change. I'm not going to read the entire statement that I read for the first open forum. What I will say is the same rules apply as stated during the first open forum. Does anyone have any comment or anything they would like to share? Oh,
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sam. It's my first time at a school board meeting. Thank you. You can tell it's my first time at a school board meeting.
we all have to start somewhere. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a question about Exhibit A. It seems that it's lacking some transparency. My question is, what is the current status of the surveillance testing schedule? Can you expound on what the surveillance testing is in conjunction with Questar? I don't know if this is back and forth or I just,
Yeah, it shouldn't be, but.
it should be, okay.
If you're comfortable.
I'll just answer the one question.
Yes.
So surveillance testing, depending on if your employee is different if you were a student. So the employees, anyone who's unvaccinated is required to be tested weekly. That's considered surveillance testing. You're not symptomatic, you're just having a weekly test. For students, we are required to offer to the parents that they can be tested if the parents want to. So they will only be tested if the parents sign permission.
Okay, so there is no implied consent for testing if the parents don't explicitly opt out?
There is no implied. Parents have to sign a permission slip for students to be tested.
Okay. Is any of this information posted anywhere for us? Because I have a few other questions about what are the weekly requirements for each school building? What are the parameters for those? What is the equipment that they're using? Is it an invasive test? Is it a spit test?
We were just preparing to get something out to the parents because we would be looking for anyone who wants to opt their child in at that point. So we will get all that information out to parents.
Okay. I think that about sums it all up, so I just wanted those. Just to be fair, just as a personal statement, this document is 24 pages long, and it seems like there's only one small little section on Exhibit A. It just does not give parents, myself, like a feeling, it looks like the whole purpose of this document was overlooked, and it's not really too transparent.
What document are you referring to?
This COVID testing contract, it seems more of it is basically about any of the discrimination and harassment, sexual harassment, all the policies, what happens. And
You're talking about from the county. Okay. Yeah, that's the contract with the county. They just put a lot of their requirements for any contract.
I get it, but I'm just making a blanket statement. It seems like Exhibit A is just glossed right over, and none of the details are really given to the parents. Thank you.
Something will be sent out to parents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam, I didn't get your last name.
Leo, L-E-O.
Okay, thank you.
My son's name is Salvatore.
Thank you. We can also post what is sent out to the parents on the website. And if people have questions, then obviously reach out. Does anyone else have any comments? Okay. Then I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons in contract negotiations.
Dave and Eric, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.